This session will explore philanthropy's ability to reach out to war-torn regions to effectively mitigate and reduce some of the effects of conflict on women and children. As many of you may surmise, women and children tend to suffer the most when conflict occurs and after conflict occurs. They are affected in many unfortunate ways. For example, displacement and becoming refugees and internally displaced persons, dealing with insecurity at ill-equipped refugee and IDP camps. They are left vulnerable to sexual assault and exploitation, including human trafficking, disease, and in all of this, women have often been and usually the sole providers of their household. This panel will look at some of these issues.
This particular subject of women, children, and conflict is very personal and very painful for a number of you in the room, a number of you who have worked in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia that was mentioned this morning, different places where you see directly the terrible toll and the impact. And we know the kind of statistics of over a short period in the Democratic Republic of Congo, 27,000 women and girls raped, the ones that had actually formally complained. And think of how many more were savagely affected in their bodies and had fistula problems and other problems probably for the rest of their lives.
No, but seriously, I'm originally from Iraq, and I grew up in war. And as someone who grew up in war, I find it really hard to talk about wars and conflicts by only talking about the frontline discussion of it, by only talking about the weapons and the troops and the bullets and the military tactics. And all of these things do happen in war, and it's very scary. But this is not the only discussion of war. This is what men usually see of war. They are the ones who are leading that frontline discussion, what I call, of war. There's another aspect of war, which is a backline discussion of it, which is what women see of war. And that has everything to do, how do you send the kids to school? How do you keep the food going and served in the dinner table? It has everything to do with fear. War, for me, is my mother playing a puppet show in the middle of a siren, so we would not be scared, my brothers and I. How do you deal with love, with fear? How do you have weddings in war? How do you fall in love in wars and get divorced and whatever it is? But there's a backline discussion of war that we do not discuss as we discuss wars on an everyday basis. And we have to understand war not only from the frontline discussion, but also from the backline discussion.
As has been very strongly pointed out already today, it is the women and children in these countries that really bear the brunt of war. We've seen the pictures of children who are taken into war, abducted, as we saw in the movie Blood Diamond, many of them on their way to school, many of them as they couldn't escape with their families. Some enter because of financial incentives, as we just heard. Many of these children are as young as 9 or 10 years old. They're given drugs. I like to say that their souls are taken away, that they lose the value system that they probably grew up with, that violence becomes something that's not a sense of right or wrong anymore, but they simply know only to do what the commanders tell them. And much of this is because of the drug-induced situation that they put them in.
You know, my perspective about women and children in armed conflict, and in fact, my perspective on the suffering of women and children in general is perhaps a little different than some of my presenters. For 20 years, I worked in the American Red Cross and the humanitarian relief side, and saw suffering all over the world from natural disaster, and decided one day that I wanted to do something different. In Samantha Power's new book, Chaser of the Flame, I don't know how many of you had the privilege or opportunity to read it yet, but Sergio de Mello says that the humanitarian relief workers are the folks that bring the groceries. Now, that isn't to say that bringing the groceries is a bad thing, when I was in Somalia in the feeding centers, or when I was in Bosnia immediately after the war, the folks that brought the food were critically important. The relationship between humanitarian relief workers and human rights workers is critical. Often humanitarian relief workers are the ears. They are the ones that hear and see the violations but dare not speak them, else they won't be able to do their jobs. And they partner with human rights organizations to be the ones that can shine a light on incredible suffering.